Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover a fascinating and honestly kind of uncomfortable truth about how our own minds might be tricking us every single day. You know, we all like to think of ourselves as these highly rational, logical beings, right? Making choices based on cold, hard facts. But today we're exploring how our brains actually take these sneaky mental shortcuts that can severely distort our reality. We're going to break down this dangerous little trap called the availability heuristic, and more importantly, figure out how to stop it from totally sabotaging our peace of mind. So let's start with a situation pretty much all of us have found ourselves in. Why is it that reading about an illness on the internet suddenly makes you feel like you've contracted that exact disease? I mean, you have a mild headache, you do a quick search, and literally 5 minutes later, you are entirely convinced you have some rare, incurable condition. Why does our brain do this to us? Why do we automatically jump to the absolute worst-case scenario just because we read one dramatic article? Well, actually, this isn't just you being paranoid. It's a predictable, systematic error in how human memory and perception operate. The legendary investor Charles Munger perfectly sets our goal for today with this brilliant quote. He said, "It's remarkable how much long-term advantage people like us have gotten by trying to be consistently not stupid instead of trying to be very intelligent." Really think about that for a second. So much of improving our lives isn't about suddenly becoming a massive genius overnight. It's simply about recognizing our own deeply ingrained thinking errors and, well, avoiding them. It's about spotting the traps our minds set for us and deliberately choosing not to step right into them.
All right, Part 1. Distorted Views of Reality. How our worldview filters our needs.
See, we don't see the world purely as it is. Not at all. We see it through our own pre-existing rules. Our fears, our expectations, our basic human needs, and reality itself are constantly being filtered through an unconscious worldview that we've been building up since childhood. And here's the kicker. When our needs get distorted by these unconscious beliefs, we genuinely lose touch with what is real. And when that happens, well, things get painful. Pain basically results from a mismatch between reality and our perception of it. When you act as though one thing is true but reality is completely different, you get an abrupt wake-up call. It's like if you walk right into a closed glass door that you firmly believed was open, you're going to hurt your nose, right? That is a moment when you literally crash into reality. And honestly, so much of our daily anxiety and distress comes from exactly this, clinging to an illusion while reality comes crashing into us.
Moving on to Part 2. The Shortcut Machine. Energy efficient but flawed thinking.
So, you might be wondering why our brains rely on perceptions that might be totally wrong. Well, it all comes down to energy. The unconscious mind is incredibly energy efficient. It's fast-reacting and it is heavily habit-driven. Taking the time to consciously solve every single problem and evaluate every single fact in front of us, that takes way too much time and burns way too many calories. These evolutionary shortcuts are fantastic for keeping us alive in the wild, for sure. They help us navigate complex daily routines like driving to work or making your morning coffee without having to relearn all the steps every single day. The repeated thoughts and behaviors literally carve out neural pathways in our brains. But here's the catch. While these shortcuts are great for autopilot tasks, they lead to systematic, predictable thinking errors when we try to use them to make complex decisions or assess real risks.
Which brings us to Part 3, the availability heuristic, the danger of easy recall.
This is the core of our explainer today, focusing on a highly disruptive cognitive bias, the availability heuristic. This is a dangerous mental shortcut where you assess the likelihood or importance of an event based entirely on how easily you can recall similar information from memory. In other words, if you can remember it easily, your brain automatically just assumes it must be common, it must be important, and it's highly likely to happen to you. You are substituting the ease of recalling a memory for actual statistical probability. It's a massive cognitive illusion.
Let's look at Part 4, Tricked by Your Memory, when feelings override facts.
Because we live in this era of 24/7 media and constant information overload, the things that are easiest to recall are usually the things that are the most shocking, the most terrifying, or just the most sensational. Think about plane crash news reports. Because a plane crash is a massive, highly publicized tragedy, those images are super easy to recall. So your brain automatically overestimates those specific risks in your own life and tells you flying is incredibly dangerous. Or think about watching a documentary on shark attacks right before going to the beach. Suddenly, every little shadow in the water is a great white, right? We also see this with get-rich-quick stories. You hear about one person making millions on a random investment, that story sticks in your head, and suddenly you way overestimate your own chances of striking it rich. And of course, those internet illness searches we talked about earlier fit perfectly into this trap.
It's basically a battle between what easily comes to mind versus what broad data actually shows. What comes to mind is the terrifying, fiery plane crash you saw in the evening news. That feeling of danger is visceral, it's immediate. But what the broad data shows is the incredibly boring statistical reality that you are overwhelmingly safe sitting on a commercial airplane. Our brains heavily weigh that dramatic, easily accessible memory over the quiet, invisible reality of millions of safe flights. The book warns that relying solely on what easily comes to mind, rather than broad data, actively leads to really bad decision-making if you leave it unchecked.
So how do we fix it? That's part 5, making better decisions, escaping the mental trap. Okay, so we know our brains are essentially hardwiring us to overreact to vivid memories. How do we follow Charles Munger's advice and try to be consistently not stupid? Well, here are the actionable steps to take back control. First up, seek out and consider a broad range of information and data. Don't just settle for the very first thing you remember. Dig a little deeper and look for those boring statistics. Second, actively avoid making decisions based solely on recent or highly publicized events. If it's plastered all over the news, your brain is already overestimating its likelihood. Third, use decision-making checklists. You literally have to slow down that fast-reacting unconscious mind by running through a logical checklist before you act. And finally, seek expert opinions. Bring in voices that are actually grounded in data and experience, not just emotional reactions. This is how you empower yourself to use facts over a flawed memory.
I really want to leave you with this final thought today. The next time you feel absolutely certain about a risk, whether it's an illness, a flashy new investment, or just a fear of flying, pause. Just take a breath and ask yourself, is this reality or is this just the first thing that came to mind? By challenging your own immediate assumptions, you take all the power away from the availability heuristic and you step right back into the real world. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this helps you navigate your daily decisions with just a little more clarity.